Hello. This is Derek from One Over Tea, Tao Teaware, and the Empty Cup Tea Space. Welcome back to another episode of Tea Soup, a podcast all about tea culture, life in modern China, and Chinese tea. I'm your host, Derek Poskin. I've been living in China since 2016, and I've been buying, drinking, and selling Chinese tea for the past decade. So, pop on that kettle, heat up your teaware, and let's get this session started. Alright, so I am sitting in my home, my apartment here in Yangzhou, Jiangsu, China. I just got back last night around 11:30 midnight from just about a month in the Tea Mountains. And I'm feeling incredibly worn out, drained, but also strangely filled with energy. This is why I'm sitting down to do the podcast, because everything is so fresh in my mind. All of my experiences, all of the peoples, all of the mountains, all of the teas, the sleepless nights, the early mornings, the incredible traveling that took, 12 hours. Yesterday morning, I was looking at Myanmar. I was so deep into Yunnan, I was almost outside of China. And then last night, I'm back at home, sleeping in my bed. 12 hours of travel after that. So much work goes into this, but it's so rewarding in every way, and I'm just so grateful for the experiences I've had and that I can share with you all, because I feel, like I said, full of energy but also drained out. And for me, this is the idea of plasticity, right? Neuroplasticity. If you listen to Huberman, you kind of know that what I'm talking about here. It's this sense of new stimuli, frustration, learning new things, trying new things, eventually lets your mind create more connections, and it makes it a little more supple, a little more youthful, a little more young, and you start taking in all kinds of new information. And for me, travel is the biggest catalyst for plasticity, the biggest natural catalyst, because especially if you're traveling to somewhere new, somewhere you've never been, because everything is new. Everything is a challenge. I think I talked about my time in Japan. Something as simple as like going out to eat food being difficult for me. And the idea of how important eating food is to your biological being, and how high of a priority this gets set in that what is important to learn. And so for me, when I get back after a month of traveling, everything is new. Everything is easy. I feel like I'm operating at 110%. I'm going into new places that I've never been to. I'm seeing the world in a new way. And this is exactly the mentality that I want to sit down and articulate in this episode. And what I'll really just do is give you an overview of the places I went to in those 4 or 5 months, 4 or 5 weeks, just 1 month here, of traveling through China. And it started all the way back in the middle of March. I went to the Jingmai Mountain, and I really loved it. Can't wait to tell you all about it, because it was a new place to me, and something very beautiful and really easy to learn. As soon as I got out there, it all started making sense. But before I had visited, it was just this, that foggy area on your map when you're playing an open world video game. It's like you don't know what's there, and then you get out there and it all starts falling into place. Then I also went to Anji. Anji was interesting. I'll tell you exactly why, but it was less adventurous than Jingmai for sure, but very beautiful scenery and similar culture to what I'm used to here. And then I went to a few other places that I've been to before, and then Yunnan, the great mysterious void. Getting back to what I talked about traveling, and especially traveling to new places, I've been doing this tea thing for a while now. Like I say in the intro, since 2016 I've been living in China, and it really essentially, when I first got here, my biggest priority was to travel, was to see tea, was to touch a tea leaf. Because before moving to China, I'd never seen a tea plant. I'd never walked through a tea mountain and stuff like that, and so it was all novel to me. And so as soon as I got to China, I started traveling. And, I've been doing this for, that was 2016, it's 2025 now. That's 9 years, almost 10 years now. And I've been to so many places. I know so many people in so many different regions that it's very easy for me now. If I don't want to leave my apartment, literally if I don't want to leave this room, I can message a tea farmer on the edge of China and they could send tea to me. That's the beauty of this modern world. But then also this kind of connection and trust that if you've been listening to Tea Soup, you know it's a very personal kind of connection that I'm building with these tea farmers and with these people living in these mountains, really connecting with them as human beings. I couldn't really fake that by telling you all of these stories and really thinking about them as human beings and explaining how they act, what they do, what their priorities are in life. Like it's an ethnography of sorts, looking at all of these people. And some of my experiences in Yunnan this year was very much felt like anthropology, just like pure field research, like really digging deep into these out there cultures. But I do this every year, and all of my friends are asking me like, "Oh, where are you going this year? What are you excited about?" But one of my friends, Marius, he always asks me, "Are you going anywhere new?" And I really like this question because a lot of other people just ask me the same questions, and I can say, "Oh yeah, I'm seeing some friends in Hangzhou, whatever, getting that Longjing tea." And then he's asked me, "Are you going anywhere new?" And I have to really think about it, and I think, why does this question really mean a lot more to me than just a general "where are you going?" And it's this novel idea. It's this idea of challenging myself, of growth, of expanding my horizons. And so, yeah, it's every year I've incorporated this where I'm thinking of like, okay, like I'll revisit these friends here and then I'll go to this new location here. And every year I kind of try and see people. Every other year I try and see farmers and friends and stuff like that. So this year, for instance, I didn't go to Suzhou. I didn't go to Fuding, right? And those are the places I really love to go because, I have good connections with them, really good people, very hospitable, and their teas are fantastic. But last year I went to both these places, and so, I have to prioritize with a limited amount of time. I think the Anji Bai Cha in the Anji and Zhejiang, limited amount of time is very accurate with them. Their harvest season is just 18 days. And so, a lot of work goes into those 18 days. But I visited them late March, right before they started harvesting. And that was mid-March actually. Yeah, so I went to Anji first, I believe, and then I went to Jingmai. It all melds together in my mind here. But I visited them right before they harvested, and they're just kind of relaxed. They're chill, different kind of people. And then I see what they're posting during their harvest season, and they're like sleepless nights, working so much, selling so much tea. It's a wild just switch that gets flipped. So this year's sourcing trips was kind of like, let me bookend it here with Anji was the first place I went, and then Bada Mountain, the Bulong village of Zhanglang village in Bada Mountain in Yunnan, on the border of Yunnan and Myanmar. That was the last place I went. And so for me, Anji was very civilized. And civilized, forgive my usage of this word, but what I mean is it feels like my city here. Anji in Zhejiang, Yangzhou and Jiangsu, very similar cultures, very similar GDP, very similar foods. And yeah, it really didn't feel like a tea trip necessarily. It felt like I was sourcing tea in the backyard, like Suzhou or Hangzhou or something like that. And then I get out to Bada Mountain, and I don't know the language. A lot of people ask me about that. When I get into the tea mountains, they say, "Oh, do they speak Mandarin? Do they speak like the normal Chinese? Can you understand what they say?" And most of the time, the answer is yes. And even in Bada Mountain, the answer was yes. But when they're with themselves, they're speaking their language. They're speaking their Bulong dialect, which I cannot understand. Chinese people cannot understand. It's a totally different dialect. The Bulong people are one of the 56 minorities in China. And so this year I saw the Bulong people, I saw the Hani people, I saw the Dai people, and I saw the Yao people, all down south in Yunnan. And it was really cool to see how these cultures both identify themselves individually and then in comparison with the other minority cultures. But then they all kind of identify themselves against the Han people, which not against, but in comparison with the Han people, which is the vast majority of people here in China. And it's so cool to see, like, just really getting down deep into it, because in Hubei, where we have that garden, Alex and Ensher and Hefeng, a lot of the people there are the Tujia minority. But the Tujia minority, it doesn't feel like it has as visible culture. I have a friend, Gong R, who's going to do some of the artwork for the tea cakes this year. She's very much an anthropologist, an artist, researches the Tujia culture, and she's doing a lot of work to help revitalize it, to find the missing links, because there does feel like there's a disconnect between the ancient Tujia cultures and the modern Tujia people. And be that society, be that because of the things that China has developed in the recent years, since the 60s and stuff like that, there does seem to be a disconnect. Whereas the people, the Yao people in Yiwu, they are so entrenched in their culture, so entrenched in this little part of the world that spans the borders between China and Laos. Like, the indigenous peoples that have been living there for thousands of years have their culture, have their kinships, have their communities, and then borders get drawn between them. And so in Yiwu and Guafengjai, there were so many people from Laos that had just walked over the border, and they're like, oh, this is my cousin. Like, I belong here. Like, what? Are you going to make me cross the border just to see my family? And it's through the mountains, and even, it was really wild. I can't wait to really dig into the Guafengjai scene, because it's a small, isolated village. And even like the police, I saw like the border patrol police, whatever, come by, and they gently, said like, is anyone over here that didn't cross the border, because they need to go back? And they're like, oh, and some of the people just like kind of like ran and took off, like just disappeared, and then came back later that night, and we're like, where'd you go? They're like, oh, I just I hid it for a while. But it's like no one's getting like arrested and thrown into a prison. They're just being asked to leave and come back the proper way, because it's like it's a village that seems to kind of rule themselves. Now, another funny part about this, I'll get this into the story, is I was there with some Chinese daily reporters, and China Daily is like a government-run news agency. And so these are like government employees, and they're seeing this firsthand of people just walking across the border, people from Laos being here, and them just telling them like, yeah, I'm from Laos. Like, did you cross the border properly? And they're like, no, I rode my motorcycle through the hills. And they're like, I can't believe this. Very awkward kind of situations. But yeah, no, I think Yiwu, definitely Guafengjai, definitely the Bada Mountain. These really, and even Jingma, I think those all really deserve their own tea soup episode. In this episode, I'll just talk about the places that I have already been to, that I revisited, some old friends. That's the Hangzhou's Westlake area, Nine Trees and all them, and also Wenzitong up on the Wudong Mountain. That's what I'll kind of focus on in this episode. Hangzhou is really funny because I was there at almost the perfect time for the season, but then also the weather did something funny, where in Hangzhou, for the Westlake area, when you're picking the dragon well, the very, very first dragon well that comes out is really often not considered proper dragon well by the people in the Hangzhou's Westlake, because they don't really grow it there. It's the Wuniuzao. This is the dark cow, the early dark cow. And it's called early because it is actually a specifically cultivated cultivar. Cultivated cultivar. Specifically cultivated for its early sprouting effects. And so this tea is one of the first ones to sprout. Usually by the end of February, you can start picking it. Maybe like early March. Before that, the Wu Niu Zhao is the earliest. The second earliest is actually the 43. The 43, Dragon Well 43, was also cultivated to have a longer sprouting season, right? And so the Chuntijong sprouts last. It's the heirloom cultivar. Then you have the Dragon Well 43 and the 108 that kind of sprout, pretty early, usually like mid-March, around the 15th, around the 20th of March at the latest. The Chuntijong usually doesn't start until the beginning of April, making for the Mingqian Chuntijong harvest really difficult because it's like you have a few days really to get the good Chuntijong. And so to recap that, the earliest you'll get is the Wuniu Zhao, which a lot of people don't consider Dragonwell. It's really fat, short buds. Then you have the 108 and 43 that sprout mid-March. And then you have the Chuntijong that sprouts, early April. And so by the time I rocked into the Westlake area, this was right around April 1st or March 31st. And basically, all of the 108 and the 43 had already been harvested. A majority of it had already been harvested, and everyone was waiting for the Chuntijong to sprout. However, this year was fantastic weather-wise. Really nice, bright, sunny days. A little bit of rain here and there to get everything to sprout. But then right after the 43 and 108 finished, around late March, there was a huge cold spell. Really, really cold, like snow in the mountains of Fujian, stuff like that. And the Chuntijong just got really shy. And so there was this like weird, awkward gap of like 2 or 3 days when I was in Dragonwell, in the Westlake area, where very little was happening, right? It was like the Chuntijong had sprouted, but it was just barely growing because the weather was so cold. It was like the coldest it had been in the past like 2 weeks. And the 43-108 was already done. The 43-108 was already done. And I was going to places and there was just like no tea going on. Like no one was making tea. I have screenshots of the farmers like posting on their feeds, on their social media feeds, like no tea today, guys. Like stop messaging me. And it's so funny because last year there was also a shortage of tea, but it was because of, also because of weather conditions, but because it was raining so much. Where this year the weather was beautiful, warm, sunny, perfect, and then there was just like really intense cold front that just delayed everything a few days. And, delaying things a few days feels like it doesn't mean a lot. But when you're running up against a deadline, that is the Mingqian festival, that is the Qingming festival, and you have to get everything done before the 4th or 5th, and it's April 1st, and things are still not ready to be picked, and you can't do anything. There's this incredible sense of frustration and anxiety, and it was an awkward time to be in Hangzhou. But luckily I was going to Hangzhou for a few reasons. If you have been listening to the Tea Soup, last year I got married. And this year I went on some of the tea trips with my wife. And Hangzhou was one of them because we bought a little house in Yangzhou, in the old town, and we're renovating it. We're beginning to fix it up. This is the Empty Cup tea space. And we have a designer friend from Yangzhou who currently lives in Hangzhou. His name is Xiao A, or Little A. And he is an incredibly talented designer. He has really, really good tastes. And everything that when we talk about what we want for the tea space, he's on board and giving us better suggestions and everything. And so we've started designing it. He's given us some of the plans for it. We're really getting into the nitty-gritty details right now about, water, electricity, lighting, stuff like that. But our plan to go to Hangzhou is to meet with him, see some places in Hangzhou that he recommends, and then he also had a friend that he wanted to introduce me to. They have a really cool coffee roasting facility. It's not really a coffee house. It's more just they're getting ready to really export and do more coffee roasting and stuff like that. And we were thinking about doing some coffee in the tea house as well. because you gotta cover all your caffeinated bases. But it was really interesting going there and seeing their friends because this is in the Hangzhou Art Institute campus. And the building is a government building. And Xiao A says he wants to introduce me to some government friends of his. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll see where this goes. If they want to fund my tea house, okay, that's fantastic. And so I meet the government people, and they're showing me all of their different campus locations. I'm like, this is weird. Why are they showing me all of these office spaces and this center for entrepreneurs? And they say we want you to sell One River tea stuff here. And I'm like, oh, really? Like, I should probably follow up with them because I'm not really sure what the deal is. Like, if they're going to give One River Tea an office space, a studio space, something like that, and then we would just sell our products domestically there, or if we would be cooperating with some of the coffee roasting friends of Xiao A's. But either way, it seems like there's a lot of money, a lot of government money that is going into funding these kind of international development entrepreneurs, people that are invested in the cultural heritage, the intangible heritage of China, of Hangzhou. However, I like doing my own thing. I don't like kind of being under the thumb of an agency, like with an office space that's been provided by them, and I have to do certain things for them and come into the office all the time. It's a cool idea, a cool opportunity, and I'm just like feeling out that levels the fourth level of luck, where things are starting to come to me and seeing now what I want. And this is funny because I'll get into it in another episode of Tea Soup. This idea of selling out, this idea of doing things for money, doing things for like commercial products, being a poster child of something else. And so that's essentially what the government is trying to get One River Tea to do here, is kind of be the poster child of international commerce in this, this area of Hangzhou, which I hate to say that it's not really my vibe. I think Hangzhou is fascinating because in Hangzhou they call it the Guigu, the Silicon Valley. This is where a lot of the high tech stuff from China comes. This is the origin of Alibaba, a lot of the music platforms and stuff here as well. And there's this sense of it feels a little bougie. I don't know. I hate to say it like that, but it seems like a lot of pretense, a lot of people trying to impress each other, and it doesn't feel as real as what I feel when I think of One River Tea and think of drinking tea and stuff. And so even though I potentially have this good offer, I'm still not really keen on it because again, I don't really want to do work in a government building in an office complex. I'd rather have a little tea house. Huh? Anyways, it was an interesting thing as well because there are some very wealthy people, some very well-connected people there in Hangzhou. Hangzhou is an old capital of China, and I do love it. I do love Hangzhou for its location, for its culture, for its history. But a lot of times when I go to Hangzhou, I'm just in the liminal mountain space that kind of borders the city. And so there's some really beautiful green spaces, temples, mountains. You can essentially hike from one edge of the West Lake all the way around it to the other side. And this kind of totally eclipses, or not eclipses, but if you think of the West Lake as a circle, this totally goes along one half of the circle. That's the mountain range. So I guess you could say it totally rims the lake, but maybe that's not so poetic. It totally crescents the lake, this liminal mountain space I'm talking about. On the other half of the circle, that is the city. And then there's also the Chantang River that kind of cuts through down south. However, for me, I'm usually in that area that's kind of in the mountains. And so I don't really see myself having a tea house in the Silicon Valley of Hangzhou. That's I guess that's it. Or in the Art Institute, which could be cool, but still, like, oh, one rather serendipitous thing about the studio space, like I said, it was the art gallery campus. One funny thing about it is they were really proud about the Song Wukong Black Myth video game. And they're like, we designed it here. Like the studio that designed that video game has its building right there. You could work next to them. I'm just like, that's cool. That's pretty cool. I do love that video. You know, I've plugged it on the podcast before. I still haven't beaten it actually. I got to a boss and the rat boss. If you guys know what I'm talking about, still haven't beat the rat boss. He's a hard one. I'm waiting for it to get patched to be a little easier. I'm not ashamed of that. But yeah, I'm waiting for it to get a little easier, and then I'll play it again. I'm also waiting for more time to play video games because recently I've been a little busy. Anyways, there are some really cool people there too. I mentioned the sculptural park. There's this antiquer who just loves cultural antiques and like wood carvings and old ceramics. He has some really actually like ridiculously old vases from like the Zhou dynasty, which is, you know, like 2000 BC here in China. And he's like, yeah, like the other biggest vase or urn of this size is in the National Museum. And so this is just like, you know, probably a very wealthy personal collector. But he showed me some of his ancient teaware, and that was really fascinating, really beautiful to see. He has it spaced out through time, so like the evolution of things like the gaiwan. And one thing I noticed with a lot of the old gaiwans is just the shape of it. It's very much more short and squat. Right now, if you see a lot of gaiwans, usually they're tall and elegant. They have a really fine, tall lid button. A lot of these Qing Dynasty, Ming Dynasty gaiwans are really just short, fat bowls with like a really kind of flat lid and a really wide, low top knot or top button on it. And they were all kind of look like that. And it was really cool just to see, I don't know, like when I see fake ancient stuff, right? Like maybe there are certain things that are off about it. Like maybe they're not the right shape, not the right size. They have slight different idiosyncrasies. And the more you kind of see the true ancient things, the more you can decide what is and what isn't. For instance, I didn't see any, right, kintsugi, but I did see the silver and the brass staples. And so that stapleware, when something breaks and they staple it back together, that's been a practice that's been here for hundreds of years. And so it was really cool to see that in this guy's personal museum. Again, personal museum, you know, collector that has stuff that should be in the museum, bigger museums. This is Hangzhou. This is very wealthy people upholding cultural heritage in, you know, I don't want to say a pretentious way, but it is more of a private museum instead of a public museum. Anyways, you see where I stand on this. Anyways, it was quite an honor to see some of these pieces, and the wood engravings were just so beautiful and detailed and culturally, symbolically rich as well. And so that was a really nice opportunity that, if you remember when we talked about like the different levels of luck, right? First, second, third, fourth level of luck. This is becoming that fourth level of luck where opportunities are starting to come to me. Why did this opportunity come to me? Because I'm making a tea house and I have Xiao A as my designer, and then Xiao A told his friend told the government, and the government connected us with these, you know, museum curators and stuff like that. It's not something that I went out looking for. It was an opportunity that came to me. I followed through with it, and I'm kind of meh about it. Anyways, let's get back into the mountains here. So that was a cool little side quest out in Hangzhou to see if I could get an office space or funding for my tea house or something like that. But in Hangzhou itself, it was really nice sitting down and drinking tea with, you know, Shan Shan from Nine Trees, and also to reconnect with the people from Nine Trees. It feels like every time I go there, I'm connecting with somebody different. This year I connected a lot more with Zhang Hailong, who was like the actual tea making force behind Nine Trees. And it was really cool to see the way he works, the way he interacts with his apprentices. He's been doing a lot of the live streaming. And so when I went there, I brought my camera and I was going to film him doing what he does, that traditional wood-fired wok. If you know about how we source our bilo trun, the bilo trun is traditionally made by Old Master Shen in a wood-fired wok. And so his wife is on the other side of a division, like this brick wall, and she's firing this, putting logs and sticks and branches into this furnace, into this oven, and above the oven is the wok, where on the other side of the partition, Master Shen is making the tea. The wok heats up to 250 degrees Celsius, and he has his hands in there and he's rolling the tea leaves until they dry completely. That's how the bilo chun is made. When I went to Longjing, Hangzhou's West Lake, everyone is using electric woks, very carefully controlled electric woks that heat up just the right temperature and are very, very stable, and that's what all the apprentices are doing. But very few people, the only one I saw was really Zhang Hailong, is doing it in the traditional wood-fired wok way. And it's really cool to see. Like I said, I haven't seen anyone else doing it. And so what he's been doing is he's been doing a live stream of him making tea in the wok. And he's been getting him quite a few followers, like, 15,000 people will watch his live stream. And he'll just talk to them and they'll talk to him and they'll buy him gifts. Like when I was there, the funniest thing, I went to Nine Trees the day I was going to film him. And just outside his studio, there is an open cardboard box, like an open package. And inside is a massive living fish in a plastic bag, in a really nice thick plastic bag with a shipping label on it. And the fish is opening up its mouth and closing its mouth and blinking up at me. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? It's a massive fish, as big as my leg, really, really thick, I had no idea what's going on. I was like, what is this? Zhang Hailong was standing outside. He's like, oh, somebody sent me a fish. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, a fan sent me a fish for dinner, I guess. And so in China, you don't send flowers, I guess. you send live animals for them to eat. He was really proud of it too. It's interesting. But yeah, so it was very funny to see this other side of Zhang Hailong because he's usually very serious, but he has a really good smile. And so and he laughs quite a bit. And so when he finds something amusing, it's really entertaining. And seeing him, kind of turned on for the live stream was fun too. But yeah, drinking tea though with Shan Shan beyond the live stream and thinking about the actual teas. This year I was really impressed with the Dragon Well 43. Last year from Joe Shu from Nine Trees, I was less impressed with it. And so I actually bought from Xiao Wang or Little Wang last year. And her tea was really good. This year I bought the 108 from her because I think her 108 is fantastic. Last year her 43 did a little better than Joe Shu's. And so last year I bought 43 from Little Wang. This year though, Nine Trees had really good 43. And so what's really interesting is having multiple makers and then tasting the different teas because their teas are coming from very, very micro different plots of land on the same mountain slope. It's bizarre how detailed, how niche you can get when you really, really get into it. But again, I'm taking the opportunities of being on the mountain and drinking the teas fresh to decide which one is slightly, marginally better than the other one. And so, yeah, this is why I go to the mountains and I drink them before I buy them as well. So it was really cool to see, Nine Trees 43 did great this year. Little Ma's 108, or Little Wang's 108, fantastic. And then I think the Trun Tijong this year, I was able to drink some of the Toadsai, some of the very, very early pickings. Like I mentioned, I was there right after everything was done for the 43 108, and really before things started kicking off for the Trun Tijong. But they had a few really, really really prime pickings of the Trun Tijong I was able to try. And that was so nice. And I really think this year, if you guys are listening, Maybe you've already bought the pre-sale, but this year the Dancong is where it's at. Last year the 103 was my favorite. I think this year, from what I've tasted so far, the 20 is going to have that power, just because it has the impetus of the spring behind it, and then a sudden break, like a pumping of the brakes right before the first pluck of the cold spell. And so you get so much energy packed into these tiny leaves. I think, yeah, that Dancong is gonna slap this year. We'll see if I have any left over. I usually do a little sampler of the really nice expensive ones. These are, by the way, these are the private orders, the stuff that sells for $2 a gram. Really the most expensive green tea we buy. Really good though. Like, this is my absolute favorite part of the spring for the green teas, are these three cultivars, the 108, the Dancong, and the 43. And so if I have enough left over, I will do a small sampler, right? Maybe 5 grams of each of these cultivars, and then people can sample them themselves and see what they like. The reason I don't really offer this is because, or usually don't offer this in greater volume. One is because of the price. You know, we don't want to tie up so much of our springtime tea buying money in, some really expensive spring teas. I would prefer to use that money to buy more pu'er tea, because pu'er you can press, you can store, you can age. Green tea you need to get gone. However, if there's any left, I will create a little sampler of these 3 cultivars, and we can taste them and figure out, in 2025, which one did the best. I do 5 grams of each because usually when I brew these really nice Dragon Well green teas, this is also how they do it at Nine Trees, and Little Wong does it as well. Usually use about 2.5 grams of tea in your gaiwan, and you can brew that 3, 4, maybe 5 times. Really nice, really clear, really crisp. The best way to get the expression of the tea. Of course, you can also do the grandpa style, and it's funny because when I'm out in these places, there are the 2 camps. Right, I mentioned in a previous Dragon Well episode, there's Tong Xiaojun and Tong Hejun. Tong Hejun is the crane gentleman, has that really orchid fragrant, beautiful, like Taoist kind of like a tea. He really likes it in the big cup, the grandpa style. Then you have Tong Xiaojun, who really likes it, strong, robust, flavorful, and he brews it in the gaiwan. And so there are these 2 camps. Nine Trees, gaiwan brewers. Little Ma kind of goes between both. Like, she's open to her customers doing it, but, there was a customer that came in when we were drinking with Shan Shan at Nine Trees, and she insisted. Oh no, it was with Zhang Hailang. Oh, and Zhang Hailang was very insistent on not drinking this in the grandpa style. But the customer was insistent on it, and I could just read. Zhang was like, okay, oh sure, yeah, okay, here, try it like this. And then he also brewed a little bit in the gaiwan and was comparing the different fragrances with her. It was really funny seeing like how specific these makers can get about how they prefer to enjoy their teas. Oh, but like, as I mentioned, I was on this trip with my wife, and it's so interesting having a companion on these trips that I usually do solo, because there are so many things that I don't really realize are big parts of the trip that I'm so used to, I'm inured to, that I don't really think about. And one thing that definitely came up this trip was the amount of fresh tea that we're drinking, and it's an absurd amount. Like, I'm used to drinking, a few sessions a day. But here, like, when I sit down with Shan Shan, I'll drink 2, 3, maybe 4 different green teas. Then we'll go eat dinner, and then I'll sit down with Zhang Hailang. I'll drink 2 or 3 different ones. Then I'll watch him make tea. Then I'll go back to Shan and drink another 1 or 2 teas. And then it's like 11 p.m. and I'm going to bed. But my wife has just been drinking tea all day, and she's just jacked. And so she's like, I cannot fall asleep. Like, what's going on? Why do I feel so weird? I'm like, oh, yeah. Yeah, we've probably been drinking a little too much caffeine. And that has actually been a big part of this trip, too. I'm less used to the caffeine than I used to be. And so I've had a lot more nights on this trip that I just don't sleep. Or I will sleep very, very lightly for like 4, maybe 5 hours, and then I'll just be wide awake. Like I woke up many times on this trip at like 5 a.m., just bright eyed, ready to go, and no possibility of sleeping any longer. And then it's like I can't fall asleep until really late as well. And it's just like the human body probably isn't meant to consume this much caffeine as we do during the tea season. You know, my friend Paul is always talking about how rough it is to drink so much matcha, so much pu'er matcha in spring because he has to blend the teas and press cakes. And so he sent me a video today of him just like drinking 3, 4, 5 different dance or pu'er matchas. And I'm like, I thought he already released his teas, but he's still drinking, he's still blending, he's still probably very little, not sleeping very well. But that is one part of this. Like I mentioned, how taxing and tiring the journeys are. The 12 hours to get from the edge of Myanmar back into my apartment here in Yangzhou. That's another one. And so the caffeine is huge. Another one is the food. And, you know, I'm obviously adventurous in spirit. I wouldn't be doing this podcast if I didn't have that adventurous spirit, exploring different cultures, eating their foods. But sometimes I just don't like the food. I think I mentioned this in the fooding white tea episodes where they're drinking that yan ro. Oh, it's so bad. It's just like meat dumplings. I don't know why, but I hate it. It's just a bowl of meat. It feels like bachelor chow. Anyways, Hangzhou, it came up with my wife realized this, and we were talking to Hangzhou people, and they almost all of them agree with us. Hangzhou doesn't have any good food. It doesn't. And it's like we ate food with them in several different restaurants, and it just feels like the Hangzhou people forgot how to cook food, or they don't know what's the good part of the food. Like for instance, we had like this pig's feet soup, which, pork knuckles fine. But with that, they had these eggs with some green. And I was like, what is this green in the fried eggs? And they're like, oh, it's lichen. And I'm like, lichen? They're like, yeah, it grows on rocks and trees. And we just, and I'm like, that's not food, guy. Like that's, anyways, it's green and stuff. Another thing that they like to eat is the big intestine of pigs. This is, the big chang. And it's not stuffed with meat like sausages would be. It's just a hollow and cut into little O-rings and super chewy, and that tastes bad. And I'm like, there's so many better parts of the animal and of this world to eat. Anyways, we asked Xiao A like what is Hangzhou's special food, and he told us, McDonald's and KFC. And so a lot of people realize like there's really slim pickings in Hangzhou. A funny thing to come out of it. Now, one interesting part about this trip is this is kind of where me and my wife split ways. My wife goes back to Yangzhou, and I go down south into Chaozhou. However, as I mentioned, there was that really intense cold spell, and so I have like a winter coat with me. And I'm about to go down into the tropics, like below the Tropic of Cancer, where it gets really, really hot, really humid. And so my wife is like, "Oh, I can take your coat for you." And I'm like, I don't need to. You don't need to." And then she leaves, and the next day I'm like, she probably should have. And so what I did is I end up mailing myself the coat back. And this is one of my secret travel hacks. At least it works here in China, where I can mail packages to myself. I can mail packages to where I will be next week in like Sichuanbana if I need something there next week, but I don't want to hold on to it. And because I'm carrying everything on my back here, I have a backpack. It weighs 16 to 20 kg depending on where I am in the trip. And then I just either mail stuff back home, or I mail stuff to the next location, or I leave stuff at a certain place and have them ship it back to me with the tea that I'm buying. And so, yeah, eventually I ditched my coat and have another super long trip down to Chaozhou. So that's the end of Hangzhou for this trip. And now I'm getting into the Dancong oolongs. And it's so funny. I was so exasperated. I'm not angry about this, but it's our buddy Wenzitong up on Wudong Mountain. We bought tea from him back in autumn, and these are the Dancong oolong cakes we made. And we're like really excited about them. We pressed them into cakes, we sold them. They sold out in like 2 days. I hope a lot of you guys have had them and enjoy them because we wanted to press more immediately. And so what I do is I talk to him and I ask him to press the tea cakes again. Now here's where another narrative point comes in, something that I haven't been really vocal about in like the podcast or the Instagram or something like that. But Wenzitong's like has their family has medical issues, their grandmother and their father, and they have a lot of like medical bills, right? And so they're really expressing like, oh, like, do you want any more tea? I need a little extra money for this medical bill. And that's what prompted me to buy all of the autumn teas and press them into cakes because I wanted to help them out. I was like, I don't really need any more tea. But I guess I could do this. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to sell this tea, give him some extra money, help him support the family and stuff like that. And so it worked. Pressed it, sold it. It was fantastic. And then we sold out so fast, and I was like, you know what? Let's buy some more. And so we bought some more almost immediately. But then he never ended up shipping the tea. And it was like 4 months, 5 months. And we were like, where is the tea? And he kept saying, oh, he'll ship it tomorrow. He'll ship it the next day. And eventually we just had to wash our hands of it. I gave him, X amount $1,000 and he was just like, well, I definitely needed it. I will get you the tea eventually. And we're like, okay. And so what's prompted my trip here is to get that tea that we paid for that we never received. And so I had to go all the way out to the Wudong Mountains and knock on his door. And yeah, I mean he's gracious about it, and so we got the spring teas instead of the autumn teas. I think what happened is he sold us tea that didn't exist yet, and then eventually it just never existed. He assumed like, oh yeah, you buy it now and I can pick it and we can make it, but then the weather conditions just weren't right for it. The honesty part here is nice because he didn't just buy somebody else's tea, which he could have. Right, a lot of farmers, I'll just buy tea from my neighbor and then give it to you, right? But no, Wenzitong is like, it's not our tea. I'm not going to sell you somebody else's tea. So that was at least nice, but I was exasperated because I had to literally go across the country, up into the mountains, and talk to him face to face to figure all of this out and figure out where the tea was. And anyways, we have 72 pounds of tea now from the spring harvest, and spring harvest is actually superior to the autumn harvest. And so in the Chinese they say 春水秋香, which is the spring water, the autumn fragrance. But a lot of people, the spring tea also has fragrance. I think autumn tea is usually a little weaker, a little more watery. And so even in Pu'er, where maybe the gushu, the really nice spring gushu, costs like 8,000 renminbi. This autumn gushu will cost 1,000, maybe 2,000. So it's an incredibly different price. It's 8 times the price for the spring stuff, or 4 times the price for the spring stuff. And so what Wenzitong has done for us is we bought the autumn stuff, but then he gave us the spring stuff as kind of the apology for being so late and for misleading us a little bit there. And they obviously needed the money for medical bills and stuff like that. So that's why we weren't really pushing it too hard. We just had to accept the risk, or not risk, but yeah, I guess there is a certain amount of risk in doing this business. But a lot of people were asking us, when are the tea cakes coming? Some people we oversold, right? We miscounted because we didn't expect them to sell out in 2 days. And some people never received their tea cakes, and they're like, oh, I'll just wait for the repressing that's going to happen next month. And it's been like 5 months now. Anyways, I have a really funny video of me with 4, 5, 6 boxes of tea in this like tiny like Honda Civic or something. Tiny car, and I'm in the back seat just crushed by boxes because another part of the issue is there's no way to ship the tea on the mountaintop. You have to go into town to do that. And so let's walk it back to me leaving Hangzhou and getting into Chaozhou. I get into the Zhejiang airport. Chaozhou shares an airport with Zhejiang. It's kind of like 3 cities: Zhejiang, Chaozhou, Shantou, and they call it the Chaoshan area. Chaozhou has the deepest history, has the modern tea culture, the ancient tea culture. Shantou was an old failed port city, similar to like Xiamen, Guangzhou, but it just didn't do so well. And then Zhejiang is, more inland, has more minority cultural heritage, the indigenous peoples of the region. Anyways, to get from the airport to Chaozhou, it takes, 45 minutes to an hour. And then I'm trying to get up to the mountain. Wen Zitong calls his cousin, who's his next door neighbor up on the mountaintop, and they're going up there as well. I drive to this guy's tea house, get a ride to this guy's tea house, then he takes me up the mountain. And we get to the mountain, and I mentioned this in the Instagram stories. Wen Zitong and his neighbor, they all share the same last name, Wen. And the neighbor house is the party house. They have like a KTV machine. They have people that are always drinking there every night. They have like Airbnb style rooms in the elevator above their tea making space. And so they're pretty wealthy, his neighbors, compared to Wen and his family. But we go there immediately and we all start drinking, talking, eating. And what's happening here is we're deep in the tea season. And I've grown so accustomed to how they make Dancong oolong tea that I know what I'm signing up for. Usually what happens is around 8 p.m., they start the yaoqing process. And the yaoqing process for the Dancong oolong is that controlled shake, withering, wilting. This is a very slight oxidization process or maceration of the tea leaves. What you really want is that red edge on the tea leaf and the green belly. And to do this, they have very specific protocols. Once every 2 hours, they put the tea on these bamboo racks, circular bamboo racks, and they shake it. And they pile it together and they spread it out. And then they put it back on the shelf and let it sit for another 2 hours. And then they take it down, they shake it all up, they move the leaves around very gently, and then set it back down for another 2 hours. As this is happening, the tea is withering, it's becoming more and more soft, more and more rubbery, and the leaves are slightly oxidizing. This is an incredibly delicate process, which is like when I'm sitting here in the mountains, seeing these guys stay up until 2 a.m., 3 a.m. every night to do this controlled withering, I'm thinking this is one of the most complex teas I've seen made. A lot of times it's picked, it's withered, they kill the green, they roll it, they dry it. But with Dancong oolong, you have this incredibly long, protracted phase of carefully, mildly oxidizing it. And this is getting the flavors, the fragrances, really playing with the enzymes that's happening during this protein hydrolysis as these leaves are changing chemically. And so, yeah, what you do is it takes maybe like 10 minutes of work, and then you have almost 2 hours of rest. And you have to do something during those 2 hours of rest, and you can't just keep drinking tea because it's, midnight, after midnight, and you need to go to bed eventually. And so a lot of people will eat food and drink and stuff like that. Another thing you do is you go out to your neighbors. And so one of the things in the middle of the night, we're just going and visiting neighbors that are, also loose relatives of Wen Zitong, right? Because this is at Ziransun. This is in the Wudong village. Everyone kind of has the same last name. Everyone's loosely related, some form of kinship. And so we'll just go to his neighbors and drink tea and talk to them a little bit. And then we'll go back to our place and we'll make tea. And then we'll go to different neighbors and we'll drink tea and talk. And then we'll go back to our place. This is actually very similar to what I experienced in the Bada Mountains for the Bulong New Year. The Bulong New Year, it's like during those uncounted days when the last year has ended and the new year has not yet begun, you'd eat like 6, 7, 8 meals a day. I think I ate up to 7 or 8 meals in one day because I would eat at this family's house. And then we would go call on another family and we'd eat and drink with them. And then we'd go call on another family and we'd eat and drink with them. I remember counting the meals one time, and my host Sangha said, we don't count meals. Don't stop counting the meals, because it was like noon and I'm on my 4th meal. That's kind of how it feels like when you're making tea in the mountains, and everyone's loosely related. It's a small village, and everyone's kind of on the same time schedule. Like everyone's making tea, everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's doing that wilting and then resting, wilting and resting. And so, yeah, I did that for 1, 2 nights, and then I got too tired. I had to check out. And so I just spent one day just totally sleeping up on the mountaintop. Luckily, there was a rainy day. One of the days was just rainy, so rainy that the pickers stopped working. There's no tea to be picked, no tea to be made, and everyone could finally take a day off. Now, talking about the rain here, this year for the Dancong Oolong was very different from last year and the year before, to be fair. This year, the weather was perfect. It was really, really nice. Like there was sunny days, clear days, a few rainy days here and there, but you could essentially pick and make tea 20 days out of like the 22 days that this tea season had persisted when I went there. However, farmers are hilarious because they're always going to complain about something. And so last year, there was too much rain. Imagine what they're complaining about this year. Oh, not enough rain. It's like everything's growing too slowly. Like it's really nice and strong, but we just need to pick more material and finish this and then move on to that. And so the Bilo Chun guys were the same. They're like, there wasn't enough rain this year. I'm like, well, last year there was too much rain. Like, what do you want? And it's this really intricate, perfect balance of sun and rain, of temperatures and whatnot. But yeah, no, it was a really pleasant experience to get up onto the Wudong Mountain again, see Wen Zitong, and just reconnect with him. Because as I said, like there were many months where there was a lot of frustration on our end, and a lot of me like to the point where I was even like, is this Wen Zitong or did somebody like hack his phone? Because it was just like I didn't get a video call from him, I didn't get the tea, I paid him a lot of money, and there's just kind of that radio silence. But getting up to the mountains, seeing him, talking with him, I realized, what was going on. There's a lot of pressure from, sick family members and stuff like that. He had essentially been on the mountain the entire time. Wen Zitong is a young guy, like 20, 24 years old, and he usually lives in the bigger cities. Chaozhou, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, where there's a nightlife, there's a lot of things going on, but he was essentially isolated into that mountaintop village where I said there's no post. There's nothing to do up there except for look after your family. And I think he was, in a little bit of a rut there. So shout out to Wen Zitong. Love you, buddy. And I'm so excited we have your teas because, yeah, I mean, his teas are my favorite Dancong oolongs I've ever had. Like, ever had. And I've been doing this for a while. Everything he gives me is just phenomenal, and I cannot speak more highly of it, of his teas, of his ability, of his gardens. And yeah, there's a lot of potentially drama that goes into getting these teas, securing these teas, but in no way would I do it any other way. It's so worth it. And I just love the fact that I can go all the way across the country up into the mountain and talk to him face to face to kind of resolve any issues that are going on between us. So it was really nice. He drove me down to the city with my 72 pounds of tea, and we got them shipped off, and I finally felt relieved. And yeah, it was a very good trip just getting out there. But these are kind of two places that I've been to before, but every time I go there, they're slightly different. The Wudong Mountains, and then there's the Hangzhou's West Lake and Nine Trees, and I see just different sides of it every year. And like I said earlier in the episode, I'm at that place where I could easily just message, well, I say that now. I could easily message, Nine Trees and ask them for tea, and they would send me tea. I don't have to go all the way there to get it, but I guess I just gave the counter argument where sometimes I do have to go all the way out there to get the teas. But again, this is just the hidden side of the job. But again, it's exciting, it's fun, it's connecting with the people, it's connecting with the teas, and so rewarding in every way. Another funny thing that I've experienced here is like the people like me who go to the mountains every year to secure their teas and buy their teas. As I mentioned, it's not necessarily necessary, and it's not everyone does it. But I do it, and then some other people do it, and I've been to Wenzitong so many times. There's a couple from Guangzhou that go there every year and spend about 2 weeks there and just watch the processing of the teas that they want. And so they buy a lot of the mother bush teas like the Da Huang, the Huangzhishang, the Xiongdi, the Brothers, the Gardenia fragrance, the really Danju, single bush, ancient tree stuff. And they'll be there for when the tea leaves are picked, to when the tea leaves are dried and withered and processed, and then they'll do the sorting of the Huangpian themselves. And then they'll carefully load all of this into their cars and take it back to Guangzhou. They're not relying on just calling in an order. They want to go to the mountains, see it, and pick it up. Now, there's a certain level of paranoia here that ideally is not warranted, right? Ideally, you could just call and get the teas you want, but I saw this also in Guafengzhai, in Yiwu. People were just like, there's this 2 people, and they got some Danju tea, and they just hawk-eyed the tea for like 48 hours. Like sat and watched the tea dry, watched the tea wither, and like one of them was always on guard duty. Like they were hyper paranoid about somebody doing the switcheroo on this tea. And I'm not so paranoid, right? Though I also do go to the mountains and I do follow the leaf, right? I do have a loose awareness of seeing the tea that's getting made, like that Guafengzhai. Like I saw the tea leaves picked, I picked which ones I want, and I marked the bags, and then I saw the bags get, sorted and shipped to me. But I didn't, overbearingly do that. But yeah, no, it's so funny because, yeah, like as I was leaving Wudong Mountains, I saw this couple come up, and we kind of like, oh, I see you, you see me. We know what we're doing here. I was like, how long are you going to stay here? And they're like, 2 weeks. And I knew exactly, they just wanted to wait until everything got processed, then take it back themselves. I mean, this is a really cool level of dedication. Not necessary all the time, but, I can respect people that do it, but I also kind of do it myself, so. One thing I did this year, hopefully better than last year, is I took a lot of actual nice, 4K videos on my Sony with my microphones, brought my tripod, and I hope to create some nicer long-form videos for the YouTube. And here I can plug the YouTube. It's Derek Poskin, and yeah, it used to be One River Tea, but I've kind of changed it because I'm doing more teaware stuff, more tea house stuff, more tea stuff, and maybe even some stuff that's not really related to tea on the YouTube channel. You might even be listening to this tea soup on the YouTube, so hopefully I will have some other episodes out, some other videos out that cover different tea topics, and you can kind of see the people behind the teas that I've talked about here on Tea Soup. You can see the mountains, see the processing, and get a better feel for the kind of like the images that are forming in your head for these people. I hope the image of Wenzitong isn't too strikingly different from what you've built up or something like that. Or Zhang Hailong and his living fish in a cardboard box. Anyways, it's been a long trip and I should really get some rest. I can't believe I'm doing this the first day I'm back in my apartment, but again, I felt that impetus of something that is in motion stays in motion, right? This is that plasticity. Like, it's difficult at the beginning to start learning new things, but as soon as you start and you get into the rhythm of it, it becomes easier, and then you really find yourself craving these new stimuli and craving this, momentum that pushes you forward. And so here I am, really just wanting to reflect on everything I experienced, and thank you guys so much for listening and joining me on these trips. Somebody recently, people almost always reach out to me about listening to the Tea Soup and how grateful they are for it, and I just want to say that I am incredibly grateful for you guys sticking with it, finding it so interesting, and for me, I'm just explaining what's happened in my life. Like, I'm so grateful that is something to be interested in, I guess. I'm living the life of my dreams for sure, so. I still have plenty more stories. The Anji Baicha, we have the Yiwu, the Guafengzhai, we have the Bada Mountain, and the Jingmai Mountain. Those are all really cool stories, really cool people to meet through this narrative venture and everything. So really excited about the next few episodes to come. And until next time, guys, this is Derek from One Over Tea, Tao Tea Empty Cup, Brew Happy.